Our podcast took a month off from production, and we're returning in the midst of a nation in full-blown crisis. And not just for immigrants' rights, but for all of our rights. For those of us in LA, the year started out with horrific fires that decimated entire communities, including a historically Black neighborhood in Altadena. It was devastating to experience this climate catastrophe for all of us in Los Angeles County. We had power outages, water shortages, toxic air, blaring emergency alerts that rattled our nerves, and our normally blue California skies were painted brown with dark, heavy clouds that rained ash for days. And in all this destruction, when things felt so helpless to so many of us, I witnessed the beauty of solidarity and collective action. From the raging flames emerged the power of community. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people showed up in support, bringing water, food, clothes, money, masks, music, you name it. There were spreadsheets organizing everything, even tracking landlords and businesses that were trying to price gouge and profit off of people's pain and loss. The community looked out for the community. And of course, because it's Los Angeles, or El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Ángeles, to be precise, the most beautiful thing of all was seeing that so many of these efforts were being spearheaded by immigrants and women, people of color. Nobody was waiting around for FEMA. El Pueblo came together. We were our own FEMA. It was truly the best of humanity at work. And now we're here as a nation witnessing perhaps the worst of humanity. Hard at work dismantling our freedoms and eroding our shared rights and values as Americans. Immigrants' rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, our human, civil, and constitutional rights that have been hard fought and won over decades by historically marginalized communities. Our very liberty and democracy are under attack. And our country is now in the hands of destructive extremists who have little regard for the Constitution or the rule of law. And they're doing harm at an astonishing pace. I've struggled with what to say about this. Many of us saw this coming, but that doesn't really help, does it? And I'm sure there's a lot of people looking around wondering, is this really happening? This can't be happening, but it is. And the road to this new American fascism was constructed and continues to be built on the backs of immigrants. If you'll recall, the 2024 presidential election that brought us here was all about immigrants and immigration. For 8 years, immigrants were relentlessly scapegoated and dehumanized and unjustly accused of horrible things. That pattern continues now with implications for all of us. The Laken-Riley legislation, for example, recently signed into law, strips away due process for immigrants. So an immigrant can now be accused of a crime or suspected of a crime, like shoplifting, for example, and that alone is enough to detain them indefinitely and without due process. I want to say that again. Immigrants can now just be accused of a crime, and that alone is enough to lock them up and throw away the key. Anyone cheering for this doesn't seem to understand, or maybe doesn't care, that this doesn't make us safer as a country. On the contrary, it weakens the very foundation upon which our entire justice system was built, the right to due process. This makes all of us vulnerable and places us on a really dangerous, slippery slope. Here's another example. Guantanamo Bay will now be used as a detention camp for 30,000 immigrants. And now we're talking about shipping not only immigrants, but U.S. citizens to El Salvador to be held in Salvadoran prisons that are known for their human rights abuses. This, of course, is on top of the executive orders issued on day one of the new administration, targeting immigrants. These orders seek to do a number of things, so many that I can't name them all, but they include things like stripping away birthright citizenship, expanding mass detention, declaring a national emergency at the border, and hint at invoking the Alien Enemies Act and the Insurrection Act, which would give sweeping wartime powers to the president, expand expedited removals of immigrants, delegate immigration authority to local law enforcement, punish sanctuary cities, threaten to penalize individuals and organizations that help immigrant communities. They order the Department of Homeland Security to expand the list of banned countries so that individuals traveling from these countries will not be allowed entry to the U.S. They end humanitarian protections for people fleeing violence and seeking safety in the U.S. They close the door to asylum seekers, people fleeing dangerous conditions. This is a lot, and that's not even the half of it. And of course, I can't leave out ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which has been terrorizing communities across the country for the last 2 weeks. This is a moment in our history when we're all being called to mobilize. And this fight isn't only for immigrants. We all have a role to play. So this is what we're going to do on the NILC Freedom to Thrive podcast. In addition to having amazing guests who are culture makers, moving forward, we're going to do the following. We're going to share resources and information that you can use and share and act on. My brilliant National Immigration Law Center colleagues will be joining us to share legal analysis, insight, and information. We're going to break down what's happening in this country and be more timely with our discussions. And we'll be highlighting the voices of those in the community who are coming together to fight for our rights. More than that, we're going to hold on to our shared humanity. Because as I've said before, when we allow for the dehumanization of a people, atrocities follow. And we're seeing this play out in real time. We'll amplify the voices that have been historically marginalized and silenced and showcase our resilience, our power, and our resistance. And I want to say something about resistance. Resistance comes in many forms, not the least of which is joy. As the poet J. Drew Lanham said, joy is the justice we give ourselves. In times of oppression, love is a revolutionary act of resistance too. And creativity is resistance. Music, dance, poetry, art, writing. These have all always played a role in resistance movements, and we need those things too. This is a moment for artists and culture makers. So we're going to continue to have those guests and those conversations as well. And I'll close with this. Democracy is not a spectator sport. That is a quote attributed to Lottie Scharfman, a refugee who escaped with her family from Austria during World War II. This moment in this historical timeline that we're living under is a moment that's calling on all of us to get involved in protecting and preserving our democracy. It's a moment that's calling on us to be in community and stand up for our rights. Observing from the sidelines won't be an option if we want to save our country. Those in power seeking to dismantle our democracy won't concede our freedom and our rights and our liberty unless we demand it. I hope you'll stay with us and continue listening to this podcast. I hope you'll stand with us as we fight for and demand our rights. And I hope that you'll be inspired and find moments of joy and love and community for yourself as well. Thank you for listening and for standing in power with us as we enter the fight of our lives. I want to thank our listeners for spending time with us. For more immigration truths, visit us at nilc.org and freedomtothrive.com. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I look forward to continuing this conversation with all of you.